My name is Nadia Osei. I am 29 years old. I am a forensic accountant living in Chicago, Illinois, and for most of my life I have been the kind of person who is described without being named. Not in the cruel way. Not the way someone is written out of a story. In the quieter way, the way a quality gets noted and borrowed and passed around a room without anyone thinking to attach it to its origin. The way someone says we were always a hardworking family and means it and believes it and has no awareness at all that they're describing the habits of one specific person while claiming them for everyone. I want to tell you about the night my father gave a speech at my brother's promotion dinner, and what he said, and what he did not say, and what I understood in the days after about the difference between those two things. My father, James Osei, is 58 years old. He came to the United States from Ghana at 24 with a business degree from the University of Ghana and a specific, practiced clarity about what hard work meant and what it was for. He built a small property management company in Cincinnati over 30 years, the kind of business that is not glamorous and is not large, but is solid in the way that things are solid when someone has paid close attention to every detail of them for 3 decades. He knows his tenants by name. He knows which buildings need what in which season. He has a yellow legal pad on his desk that he has replaced with an identical yellow legal pad every year since I was 7 years old, and every year the new one looks exactly like the old one within 2 weeks, covered in his small, precise handwriting. I grew up watching that legal pad. I grew up watching him note things down. I grew up understanding, without being told, that the way you kept track of the world was to write it into a form you could return to. I have my own legal pad on my desk now. I have had one since I was 19. He has 2 children. My brother Kofi is 33. He is warm and loud and ambitious in the way my father is proud of, visibly, publicly, in the register that my father understands as success. Kofi finished his MBA at Ohio State 3 years ago and has been moving quickly through a financial consulting firm in Cincinnati ever since, gathering promotions the way some people gather momentum, each one feeding the next. My father talks about Kofi the way he talks about his best buildings, with a specific, satisfied attention, the attention of a man who has invested in something and is watching it perform. I am the younger one. I am the quieter one. I finished my undergraduate degree in accounting at Northwestern on a merit scholarship I applied for myself after reading about it in a departmental newsletter at 2 a.m. in the university library, and I took a position at a forensic accounting firm in Chicago at 23 and have been there 6 years, working on financial fraud investigations that require the kind of sustained, detailed attention that I learned, without knowing I was learning it, from watching my father cover yellow legal pads in small, precise handwriting every day of my childhood. My father is proud of me. I want to say that, and I want to mean it in the plain factual sense, because I believe it is true. He tells people I work in Chicago. He says I am doing well. He says this with the warmth of a man who genuinely means it and does not notice, because he has never had to notice, that the warmth he gives me is the warmth of a summary while the warmth he gives Kofi is the warmth of a story. I want to tell you what I mean by that distinction because I think it matters to what happened at Sterling House and to everything that came after. When Kofi passed the Series 7 exam on his first attempt, my father called me to tell me. He told me the score. He told me the rank percentile. He told me about the Saturday morning 2 weeks before the exam when Kofi had called him at 7 a.m. and they had worked through practice questions together for 2 hours at the kitchen table. He told me this story with the specific energy of a man who had been part of something and needed to account for his role in it. When I passed the Certified Fraud Examiner examination at 24, the same year Kofi passed his Series 7, my father said, "That is very good, Nadia. I knew you would pass." He said it the way you say a fact. It was warm. It was brief. It contained, in its brevity, the entire shape of how he understood me. He knew I would pass because I always passed, because that was the condition I operated in. My competence was assumed the way weather is assumed. It was either there or it was not, and either way it did not require a story. I had been noting these differences for years. Not with resentment, not in those early years, but with the particular precision of a person who spends her professional life identifying discrepancies between what the record shows and what actually occurred. I had a good record. It simply was not the record anyone was telling stories about. The invisible labor I built for my family during this period was not the logistical kind. I was living in Chicago, 3 hours away, and the events were handled by my mother. Mine was a different kind of labor, the kind that is harder to name. I called home every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. without being asked for 6 years. Every Sunday. Not once missed since I moved to Chicago at 23. Not for travel, not for work, not for illness. I took 2 of those calls from airport terminals. I took one from a hospital waiting room when a colleague had a cardiac event during a field review, and I had ridden in the ambulance with her and still called home at 6:32 p.m. because it was Sunday, and that was when I called. I had helped my father redesign the filing system for his property management company the summer I was 26, working remotely over 3 weekends, building him a spreadsheet-based tracking system for maintenance requests, lease renewals, and vendor contracts that he still uses today. He had mentioned, in passing, that he was finding the paper system harder to manage as the portfolio grew, and I had heard that and thought, I can fix that. I fixed it without being asked and without mentioning it afterward except to send him the files and a short explanation of how to use them. He used the system every day. He told me once it had saved him considerable time. He said it as an observation, the way you observe that a road is well paved. I had reviewed Kofi's MBA application essays at his request and spent 2 evenings restructuring his argument in the second essay, from a chronological account into a thematic one that I thought read more clearly. Kofi had gotten into Ohio State. He texted me afterward. Got in. Thank you for the essay help, you're the best. I had saved that text. I am not entirely sure what the saving meant about me, except that I knew, even then, that the record mattered. Kofi's promotion dinner was on a Thursday evening in March. The firm had arranged a dinner at a restaurant called Sterling House in Cincinnati. White tablecloths, good lighting, a private room in the back. 14 people, Kofi's colleagues, his manager, a partner from the firm, my parents, my father's older brother Uncle Raymond, my mother's college friend Patricia Kemderim, who happened to be visiting from Atlanta that week, and me. I had driven down from Chicago that morning. 4.5 hours. I had a case review scheduled for the following Monday that I had spent the previous 2 evenings preparing for, and I had brought the working files with me in a folder in my bag because I knew I would need the drive back to think through a discrepancy in a receivables ledger that was not resolving cleanly. I mention this not to establish virtue, but because it is accurate. That is how I moved through my life in those years. Case files in the bag, drive time as thinking time, every hour counted for in the small, precise way I had learned from watching a man cover yellow legal pads with his handwriting every morning before anyone else in the house was awake. Kofi was in good form that evening. He has always been able to walk into a room and find its warmth immediately, the way some people can find north without a compass. He shook hands with the partner from his firm and said something that made him laugh within 40 seconds. He toasted his manager with a specificity that told everyone in the room he had thought about what to say before he arrived. He was, by any measure, the right person to be at the center of this particular evening, and I was glad for him in the uncomplicated way I am usually glad for Kofi, which is different from the complicated way I sometimes feel about what his centrality has cost me. I sat 2 seats from my father, with Patricia and Kemderim between us. Patricia is a woman of about 60 with the quality of paying full attention that not everyone has, and that I have always found steadying. She and my mother have been friends since graduate school, and she has known me since I was 3 years old. She asked me about the case I was working on before the appetizers arrived, and she listened to my answer the way people listen when they are actually following the thread rather than waiting for a pause. We were midway through the main course when my father stood up. He does this. It is his signature at family occasions, the same way it was my father's signature before him. The tapping of the glass, the room settling, the voice that knows how to carry without effort. He has a gift for this. He always has. When he speaks at these moments, he does not perform warmth. He simply has it, and it moves into the room the way heat moves, without direction, filling whatever space is available. He talked about Kofi. He talked about watching him work through the MBA program while managing a part-time consulting role, about the phone calls they had had during that period, about a particular Saturday morning when Kofi had called him at 7 a.m. to talk through a case study he was struggling with, and my father had sat at his kitchen table in his dressing gown with his legal pad and worked through it with him for 2 hours. He told this story with the pleasure of a man retelling something that confirmed everything he believed about his son and about himself as a father, and the room received it warmly because it was warm. Then he said he wanted to say something about where Kofi had learned to work the way he worked. He said Kofi had grown up watching someone in their family, someone who had never needed to be told twice, someone who showed up and did the work without requiring acknowledgement or applause, who had taught Kofi, by example, that consistency was not a talent but a decision made over and over again every day without fanfare. He said, "The one who just works. No applause. No fuss." He said, "The one who taught him that showing up is enough."
He paused.
I want to tell you about that pause, the specific quality of it, because pauses are where the actual information lives. It was not a long pause. A beat, maybe two, the natural breath of a man gathering his final thought. But in that beat I felt, with a clarity I had not expected, that his eyes did not move toward me. They stayed on Kofi. They moved to the partner from the firm. They moved to my mother, briefly, with the warm acknowledgement of a man including his wife in his gratitude. They did not move 2 seats to his left. I was sitting 2 seats to his left. I had driven 4.5 hours that morning with a receivables folder in my bag because I was the kind of person who used drive time as thinking time. I had a merit scholarship in my record from an application I had written alone at 2 a.m. in a university library. I had been covering yellow legal pads with small, precise handwriting for 10 years. I had called home every Sunday for 6 years without missing once. I had built him a tracking system that he used every day that he had described to someone once as saving him considerable time. He raised his glass to Kofi. 14 people raised their glasses. I raised mine. I looked at my father's face in the moment after. The satisfied, complete expression of a man who has said what he meant to say and said it well, and I understood something I had been approaching for a long time without quite arriving at it. He had not omitted my name from a moment of forgetfulness. He had not reached for it and missed it. The description he had given, precise, accurate, exactly right in every detail, had been assembled from 29 years of watching me, and he had delivered it to the room as a general truth, as a family quality, as the kind of statement that belongs to no one person because it belongs to the atmosphere. In the story he had just told, I was the landscape. I was the condition. I was the weather that had shaped the terrain without being named as its source. I was not a person in the story. I was a lesson the story used. Some of the people at the table looked at me when he finished. Kofi's manager. One of Kofi's colleagues, a woman whose name I did not know. Uncle Raymond, briefly, with an expression I could not read. Patricia and Kemderim, 2 seats to my right, did not look away from my face for a moment, and she did not look at me with pity. She looked at me the way a person looks at something they have seen before and are not surprised by but are still sorry about, plainly, steadily, without drama.
My father did not look at me.
I picked up my glass. I drank. I set it down. Before I tell you what happened in the days after, tell me something about where you are right now. Is there someone nearby, or are you alone? I ask because what I am going to tell you next is the kind of thing that is easier to hear when you are somewhere that knows you. I stayed for the rest of the dinner. I want to say that clearly. I stayed, and I participated, and I congratulated Kofi when he sat back down, and I meant it because his success was real, and his work had been real, and none of what I was feeling changed that. These things can exist at the same time. I have learned that carrying one does not require dropping the other. But something had shifted in me at the moment my father raised his glass, and I could feel the shift the way you feel a small, precise thing move into a new position. Not with noise, not with drama, but with the irreversibility of a lock that has just turned. I drove back to Chicago the following morning. I left at 6:47 a.m., before my parents were awake. I had left a note on the kitchen counter that said I had an early start, and I would call during the week. I drove the first 2 hours without the radio, which I never do, and I noticed I was doing it, and I left the radio off anyway because the quiet was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that belongs to you. I got back to my apartment at 11:23 a.m. I made coffee. I sat down at my desk and I opened the receivables folder because the work was there and it needed doing, and I am the kind of person who does the work that is there. I found the discrepancy I had been circling in 40 minutes. A series of intercompany transfers that had been recorded in the wrong subsidiary, cleanly masked by a legitimate restructuring but inconsistent with the timeline if you looked at the dates carefully enough. I noted it on my legal pad in the small, precise handwriting I had been using since I was 19. Then I put the pen down. I sat at my desk with the lamp on and the legal pad open in front of me, the discrepancy noted in my small, precise handwriting, and I thought about my father's speech for a long time. Not with anger. I want to be clear about that because I think the way stories like this get told implies a woman burning with something, building toward a confrontation. I was not burning. I was doing what I do with a ledger that is not balancing, applying the specific, patient focus of someone who knows that the answer is in the numbers if you look carefully enough and long enough, and without deciding in advance what you expect to find. I thought about the CFE examination result and the brief, warm summary of a man who knew I would pass. I thought about the Series 7 story told in full, with the 7 a.m. phone call and the 2 hours and the kitchen table. I thought about 6 years of Sunday calls at 6:30 p.m. and the one made from a hospital waiting room. I thought about 3 weekends of spreadsheet work described later as saving him considerable time. I thought about Kofi's second essay, restructured over 2 evenings, and the text that said, "You're the best." I thought about 14 people raising their glasses to a description that fit me in every particular detail, and my father's eyes not moving 2 seats to his left. What I arrived at, sitting at that desk under the lamp with the legal pad in front of me, was this. My father had watched me for 29 years. He had watched me do the work quietly, take the scholarship alone, build the career without announcing it, show up without requiring acknowledgement. He had watched all of that, and he had learned from it, genuinely learned from it, and he had passed what he learned to Kofi in the specific, named, story-told way that he passed things to Kofi, and he had used what he learned from me in the general, unnamed, landscape way that you use the weather. He had not done this to hurt me. That was not the complicated part. The complicated part was that he had not done it to hurt me, and it had happened anyway, and it had been happening for 29 years, and I had let it happen because I had told myself a story about not needing acknowledgement that was so well practiced I had stopped being able to tell the difference between not needing something and having given up expecting it. I called my friend Marcus Webb at 2:14 p.m. Marcus and I have worked at the same firm for 4 years. He is a senior investigator on the commercial fraud team and is one of the most methodical people I have ever met. The kind of person who reads footnotes and means it, who follows threads to their actual end rather than the end that is convenient. He is also, in the way of people who are genuinely good at their work, very good at sitting with difficult material without rushing it toward a conclusion. We had lunch together every Thursday unless a case pulled one of us under, which it regularly did, and those lunches had accumulated into the particular shape of a friendship built on shared professional language and a mutual preference for saying the difficult thing plainly. I told him what had happened at the dinner. I told him the whole thing, from the speech to the description to the raised glass to my name not said. I told him about the 6 years of Sunday calls and the 3 weekends of spreadsheet work and the CFE examination result described in 2 sentences, while the Series 7 story had warranted a full account. I told him about the legal pads. I told him what I had been sitting with at my desk for the past 3 hours. He listened without interrupting, which is something he is disciplined about in the same way he is disciplined about everything, not as a courtesy, but as a method. When you let people finish, you get the actual information instead of the version they edit toward your reactions. He was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then he said, "How long has he been doing this?" "My whole life," I said. Not the speech specifically.
No.
The general version of it. Using what I showed him, without saying where it came from. And you have been letting him. It was not an accusation. Marcus does not make accusations. He states what the evidence shows. "Yes," I said. "I have been letting him." I told myself it was fine. I didn't need the acknowledgement. The work was enough on its own. I told myself that story for 29 years, and I was very good at it. Marcus was quiet again. Not the uncomfortable quiet of someone who does not know what to say. The considered quiet of someone who is deciding what is actually true before he says it. "Nadia," he said, "you know what this is. You do this at work every day." "What do you mean?" "You find the entry that's been misclassified, the one that's been sitting in the wrong account for years, and everyone has been working around it without noticing. That's what this is. You just found it in a different ledger. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. I poured a second cup of coffee that I did not drink and sat at my desk with the lamp on and the legal pad in front of me, and I thought about what it meant that the most clarifying thing anyone had said to me about my family in years had been said by a colleague on a Thursday afternoon using accounting terminology. It meant that I had been bringing the wrong tools to the problem. Not because I lacked better tools, but because I had learned so early to apply my precision professionally and my patience personally that I had never thought to turn the professional eye toward the personal record. The record had been sitting there the whole time. The discrepancy had been there. I simply had not opened that particular ledger.
He was right.
That is exactly what it was. My father had been carrying a misclassified entry for 29 years. The entry that said my labor was ambient, my consistency was weather, my name was optional, and he had been working around it without noticing because it had never caused enough friction to require examination. It had caused me friction. It had not caused him any. I called my father 11 days later. A Sunday evening at 6:30 p.m., which is when I have always called, which is itself a small piece of evidence for everything I have been telling you. He answered on the second ring. We talked for 26 minutes. He was warm and slightly puzzled in the way he is when I call outside of a visit, as though a call alone requires a reason he has not yet identified. I let him find his footing. Then I said what I had been preparing to say, not from a script, because I do not work from scripts, but from the notes I had made on my legal pad over the 11 days between the dinner and this call.
I said, Dad.
At Kofi's dinner, you gave a speech about where his work ethic came from. You described someone who showed up without needing applause, who did the work quietly, who taught him that consistency was a decision. I was sitting 2 seats from you. That description was mine. You did not say my name. He was quiet. I'm not saying you meant to leave it out, I said. I'm saying you didn't think to put it in. And the reason you didn't think to put it in is that in the story you tell about this family, I am a condition, not a character. I have been a condition for a long time, and I have been cooperating with that story by not saying anything, and I am finished cooperating. He said after a long pause, Nadia, I did not realize you felt that way. I said, I know. That's the part I've been sitting with. He did not have an answer. I did not need one. I had not called to receive an apology that would close the subject and allow us to return to the arrangement we had always had. I had called because I had spent 29 years being the condition in my family story, and I had finally decided to put my name in it myself, out loud, in a phone call my father would have to sit with. Real credit does not require the receiver to ask. Real acknowledgement does not come 26 minutes into a Sunday phone call made by the person who deserved it. But this was what was available, and I had decided that available was not the same as sufficient, and that I was going to say so in the plainest words I had. We ended the call in the particular way of calls that have said a true thing and not yet found what to do with it. Not warmly, not coldly, but with the careful neutrality of 2 people who have just changed the terms of something and are not yet sure what the new terms will look like. My father called back 4 days later, a Wednesday evening at 7:09 p.m. I saw his name on the screen, and I let it ring once before I answered, which I had never done before in my life, and I noticed I had done it, and I answered on the second ring. He said he had been thinking about what I had said. He said he thought I was right that he had not given me the same kind of specific acknowledgement he had given Kofi over the years. He said he was sorry for it. He did not qualify the apology with an explanation of his intentions or a request that I understand the context. He said it directly, in the measured way of a man who has composed himself before a difficult conversation the way he composes himself before a difficult negotiation. Full attention, no ceremony, no wasted language. Then he said, I want you to know that I have always known where it came from. The consistency, the precision, the way Kofi learned to keep track of things. I knew it came from watching you. I should have said that. I should have been saying it for a long time. I wrote those 3 sentences down on my legal pad while he was still on the phone, which I had also never done before. I wrote them in the same small, precise handwriting I had been using since I was 19, and I kept the page, and it is still there in the pad I was using that month, between a note about the receivables discrepancy I had resolved that morning, and a reminder to call the property manager about a client site visit the following week. It was not everything. It was not the neat version. The one where all 29 years resolve in a single phone call, and we go forward differently in every way, and the family becomes a different kind of family overnight. Real families do not resolve in single phone calls. They shift, slowly or partially, or in the specific limited ways that the people in them are capable of shifting, and you decide what you can stand on from that, and what you cannot. What I could stand on was this. My father had said, plainly and without qualification, that he had known where the lesson came from. He had known and he had not said it, and now he had said it, and the record had that entry in it now, and it could not be removed. Some credit arrives late. That does not make it worthless. It makes it late. Those are different things, and knowing the difference is how you decide what to do next. I decided to stay in the ledger, to keep calling on Sundays, to keep noting things down, to keep doing the work that is mine to do, and to stop allowing that work to be carried in someone else's account. It is a small distinction. It is the only one that matters. I still call on Sundays at 6:30. I still drive to Cincinnati for the occasions that matter. I still have the legal pad on my desk, the same kind my father has used since I was 7, and I still note things down in it, because that is how I keep track of the world, and it is a habit that belongs to me regardless of where I learned it. My father and I have talked 4 more times since the Wednesday call. The conversations have been careful, in the way that conversations are careful when 2 people are learning a new arrangement. He has mentioned my work specifically twice. He asked about the case I was working on in September, not generally, not how is work, but how did that receivables matter resolve. He had remembered the word receivables from a conversation 3 months earlier. I noted that too. What has changed is this. I do not cooperate with invisibility anymore. Not silently. Not by omission. When I am the origin of something, I say so. Not loudly, not as a correction, but as a fact, the way you note a fact in a ledger because the record requires it to be there, because a record that omits the origin of its own entries is not a record. It is a story someone decided to tell. A lesson without a name is not gratitude. A portrait without a signature is not a gift. Being described is not the same as being known. My father described me precisely in front of 14 people. He used every detail correctly. He simply could not or did not say the name of the person the details belonged to. I have said it for him now. In this call, and in the ones that followed, and in every room I have walked into since, I have been the one who puts my own name in the story. That is not bitterness. That is bookkeeping. If you have ever been the lesson someone else learned from, if you have watched a quality you built in yourself get attributed to the family, the culture, the circumstance, anything except you, I want to ask you something. Do you know which entries in your family's ledger belong to you? The ones that were yours, that you built, that someone else has been carrying in the wrong account for years? And what would it mean to reclassify them, not to take anything away, but simply to put your name where your name belongs?